All right. I hereby call to order this meeting of the Strategic Housing Finance Corporation of Paris County. Let's have the roll call.
President Julio,
Here.
Vice President Lisa, Director DeLee,
Yes, here.
Director Keisha,
Here.
Director Wilmer,
Here.
Director Rebecca, Director Jan.
We have a quorum. Let's begin with our public forum citizen communication portion. And I know that Ms. Garcia is signed up to speak, so can she come up first to the front? You have 3 minutes. And
Okay. Good morning. My name is Gabby Garcia. I'm an organizer with BASTA and I work with the Neighbors at Rosemont Tenants Association. I understand that today the board will be reviewing changes to a performance evaluation for the EVP, Patrick Howard. This is an important step toward ensuring that what happened at Rosemont is not repeated at other SHFC properties. We reviewed the forms and have the following comments. First of all, it's important that the criteria includes some measure of performance that addresses property issues and encompasses all the conditions which affect tenants that relate to health, safety, and the treatment of tenants. This would open the scope to include not only repair issues, but also issues with utility billing, towing, fair housing, and interference with organizing efforts. Second, eviction filings at SHFC properties should also be reflected in the evaluation because eviction filings are often used by management as a collection tool and could result in a dismissal. And this would mean that they wouldn't be captured by just looking at occupancy rates. The neighbors at Rosemont remain committed to ensuring that there is accountability for what happened to them. Although they are under new ownership and things are slowly improving, the harm that was done is something that they continue to deal with on a daily basis. BASTA will be working with these tenants to come up with recommendations for this board on how to best hold those responsible accountable. And in the coming months, we'll come back to this board with our recommendations. Lastly, we want to make sure that proceeds from the Rosemont sale are set aside officially to further Rosemont tenants' goals of greater affordability. We appreciate the efforts that this board is making to reform SHFC and hope to continue to work with you. Thank you.
thank you. Any other citizen communication?
Nope.
That portion of the meeting. And we'll go to the consent agenda. Can we get a motion for approval of the minutes? We'll do first. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Unanimously. Discussion items. Let's begin with a discussion of our board notification policy. We'll come back to a strategic reset. We'll look at EVP evaluation. Can we put the board notification policy on the screen?
Stand by.
Standing by. I know I shared it on Boardable as a comment. It's not, I didn't see it in the board report that was posted June 30th.
I
It was
didn't,
not, because those items that you brought forward, we didn't include it in the packet,
Right, so therefore I posted it on
so we
Boardable.
can go to
Mhm.
the best for.
Yeah, it's also on the
okay,
I didn't really share it.
You're now at forum.shfctx.
yeah,
There you go.
okay. And that would have been,
It is the third item of the board discussion. The board policy. Yeah, we put it on that. Okay. So the context for this, as you know, is a discussion that we had at the board around adopting formal policies with clear guidance and expectations. My hope is that if you review the draft and have feedback that you can to incorporate before we prepare a resolution for action for August, or before it now. If you do not have feedback now, or have not had a chance to check this document, you have an opportunity to do so between now and August, or August meeting, to adjust the resolution. Is there anyone that has any comments that will make on this policy?
Well,
Yes, sir. Mr. Robbins.
I would just say that, it's important that we do notify and respond to, phone calls and emails with, and folks that's not to show up at meetings and help you too. You know, it just changes things. You understand where I'm coming from with regards to. And also, the county does have a policy that says that, you know, after so many absences, you are not, you're supposed to be reported to the commissioners for potential revolution.
Right, so the
That's
that's an important comment. Right now, we're talking about this document that Mr. Howard drafted as his recommended notification policy to the board when high stakes or materially important events occur. And so I was wondering if there were
okay.
comments about this material.
But
Yes,
when you say the board notification policy,
Yeah.
isn't that, should that not be part of?
we can move your issue to unfinished business. You want unfinished business?
Okay.
This one is specific to
Okay,
this,
yeah,
to
okay.
this document.
Okay.
And if we could just focus on this draft that Mr. Howard carefully prepared, I think is in a good place for action at our August meeting. Is there any other feedback? Seeing none. Oh, yes, Ms. Finn.
So when we get to page 2, in the chart, in terms of just how to track a communication that needs to happen, this question is actually for Mr. Howard. Under significant in the first box of the chart, the definition has to do with something that may lead to potentially significant adverse public perception. I'm wondering if there's other things that make something significant other than just perception of the public.
Well, that's not the only thing that's to
Right.
include, and you might want to blow it up a little bit.
I see.
Just for
the
everyone, no, for
financial-
everyone else, just,
Yeah, I got the financial piece.
Yeah.
That's clear and measurable. Other things?
I mean, obviously I didn't think of any more.
Okay.
I think I wrote it,
So
but I mean, if you have thoughts about it,
Yeah.
I think what we thought was things that would be concerning for folks to find out about. That public perception has a pretty broad scope, so I mean, in my view, I think it's probably in everything that you probably have concerns or others that have concerns about, but. Certainly it's your policies, we want to be more specific or articulate other items, and certainly should do that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm going here is in terms of our mission as a government entity to house and provide safe, secure, and sanitary housing. If there's an impact on residents that might be dangerous or put at risk those portions of our mission.
I think one place to take this is to kind of come up with the language we will want to add to significant. And then maybe Mr. Howard.
Yeah, certainly, I mean, I think it definitely could be.
So I think my suggestion would be, let's have draft language for the change,
Yeah,
and then have a discussion about that message board or email.
Okay.
If that is of interest. Any other feedback on this? Okay, so the expectation is we will prepare for action, and adoption at our August meeting. If directors have additional feedback they want to provide or check it out more carefully, make sure to do that by the end of this coming year. Let's go back to strategic reset, and then we will do new executive vice president evaluation and key performance indicators together. Remember, we're going to do a significant part of that executive session, but there will be a full portion of it. So let's talk about strategic reset. Context, at our previous meeting, we talked about some options given our position and our mission. Our position is that we have chapter 394 powers, which give us the ability to do special tax break, as well as for issue debt. But there are other 394s. There is one at the county. We have a different board now, although there is some overlap. Patsy, we have suspended providing significant direct support to Patsy. Patsy now has the facilities corporation as a way of subsidizing its operations. And so we are an opportunistic low-income housing tax credit developer with non-unique powers. We do have some assets and some incoming revenue. So that was sort of the starting point for discussion of what should our energy be, serve our mission for creating and preserving housing. We discussed several options in our previous meeting. Two that were very popular were what is deemed as social housing, an emerging concept for the development of affordable housing utilizing cross-subsidization from market units, and focusing on a subpopulation that is of particular import to the county. You all received the email and a message board you saw posted, both my initial draft explaining what social housing is, copying significantly, Montgomery County Housing Opportunities Commission's Housing Production Fund model, which is in some ways the neatest fit of the social housing concept for SHFC and the American landscape, as well as a discussion of the challenges of finding a subpopulation. Specifically, there's no off-the-shelf plan or clear strategy, and relative to the social housing component, it requires significant subsidization, which means other funds that we don't necessarily have, or we need to request from the county or some other public entity, as well as an inability to necessarily have immediate impact. So what I had proposed in the message boards that you will sign and will read to you today was we could use some of the limited funding that we have to help the county come up with the off-the-shelf plan for subpopulation. So to summarize, we have some special powers, but they are not unique. And we are trying to find a way to serve our mission with those special powers that fits our place in the county and city organizational chart of affordable housing entities, particularly finding those that provide financing. We have two proposals on the message board that I have worked on based on your feedback. One is the social housing direction, and the other one is the self-population study direction. The next step in the process for us is to figure out what we feel comfortable working on and preparing for our August meeting, our directors meeting, to kind of finalize the direction so that we can discuss it with the commissioners court who we are meeting with on August 24th. Final thing, and this is important, and I've said this before, and I think it's obvious. Regardless of what we do on the strategic reset, our baseline operating model is we are an opportunistic low-income housing tax credit financing entity with a set of assets. So if for some reason all of us would just get on a bus and all our knowledge and views go away, and there's a new board that's implemented by the commissioners court, that is what will continue to happen. What we are talking about is potentially on top of that, building a further complementary model that is leverages sort of the special tools that we have to be able to serve our mission more broadly at more scale, be more self-sufficient, have more resources, etc. Will that preview any feedback on either of the proposals? And be prepared for a final August discussion and setting direction.
Mr. President, I have a few things.
Yes, sir.
Next, the board members are elaborating.
Of course, yes.
I was waiting. I don't think anyone.
I don't know if there's any
Okay,
direct.
so
Yeah.
I've been vetting this idea with some of the nonprofit developers in the region, just because obviously there are clients.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I wanted to get their feedback on what they thought was necessary and what's needed, what gaps are there in the affordable housing space to help us move the idea forward. So what I'm sharing with you is I know, it's like death trap.
But it works.
So two of our attorneys, one of which is here today, Nicola, is provided us some feedback on specifically the Montgomery County analysis, and it seems like that was the one that seemed to have a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And I actually know the guy who started the guy who runs the organization, his name is Stacy Span, he just left with the Wells Fargo, so we have a relationship. So I reached out to him, waiting to get some feedback from him about the pitfalls of the program and what it takes. So I will get that feedback to you all as
Yeah.
soon as I hear back from him. He's now with Wells Fargo. But one of the things that I wanted to share was that it does require a significant amount of resources. I mean, just long story short, in order to make this happen, Montgomery County Housing Opportunities Commission is essentially the PHA for Montgomery County, which is a very large county if anybody's lived in the DC area and familiar with Montgomery County. So,
Yes, it's smaller than Travis County, just for context.
huh?
It's smaller than Travis County.
Everything's smaller than Texas.
Just for context.
Things
Smaller
in
than-
Texas, yeah. We leave Texas out of the reference to geography because everything's bigger than Texas. But
But
for
population
the
wise-
East Coast,
Yeah, I meant population wise.
yes, population wise, you're right as well. Population and land. It's not. So more dense. But they do serve as the public housing agency for Montgomery County. And if I would liken the program to anything, I would liken it to the city of Boston's affordable housing bond program. In fact, in terms of the construct and the methodology in terms of what they do and what they try to achieve. So the only thing I want to underscore is the notion that that was one tool in a tool set, that
The housing production.
the housing production fund that was being proposed for us would be one tool in a tool set of other tools being used. So my question or concern or thought process would be, what else would we be doing? And I think the recommendation would be that there would be other tools we would be using to obviously continue to generate income, which right now is a 4% tax credit program, which is what we're using. But we would have to make that determination if we were to see that as being a future direction of the organization, in terms of what we do. The other thing that I would say is, I know that we're preparing for the August meeting. One of the things I would probably suggest, just from my short feedback or initial feedback with the stakeholders, is maybe the recommendation is, rather than the specific tools, that we talk about just taking a step back and convening a group that includes the county, housing finance agency, stakeholders, and to include ourselves, to talk about what the gaps are, because I do believe we would need to really figure out what this looks like, because it is going to take a monumental effort to make this happen, and we obviously would need the support of those that are obviously in the business and the industry. So just a thought that I had was to think about that approach and maybe convene a group to talk about what's missing out there. Is it gap financing? Is it bridge loan equity, or is it something else as it relates to what we're referring to? Before we launch right into that, I think that it would be probably in our best interest. I think the other thing too is, looking at how you couple that with the work of the Travis County HFC, if the assumption is they will continue to do the work as they're doing currently, or should there be a shift? Should there be, should we think about the focus being the lower tiers versus the higher tiers in terms of in the affordable housing space, or what would that look like? So, just some thoughts that I had, I wanted to share as we were contemplating like the organization and how we reset.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. And I think there's some actionable requests in there. Do other directors have feedback to the feedback provided? And thank you for getting this email from Mr. Plummer. Is Mr. Plummer here?
Yes, the first one was a plumber, and then the other, Mr. Blunt, has a, did I? Yeah, the one sheet that's, but one stapled and one second.
I think
Okay.
yours is in-
The email is different.
Ah, okay. Oh, Mr. Plummer, yes, yes, yes.
First off, I just want to thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Howard, for, seriously taking a dive into what are the mechanics of this and what does it look like for those who executed this, this model in Montgomery County. And I can't absorb this whole thing.
Yeah, it was just last night, so
So
I didn't.
I definitely, look forward to looking at, I have actually gone ahead and watched, and read quite a bit that was published by, Housing Opportunities, Corporation, and about the mechanisms and the levers that are used to finance this remarkably innovative approach to coming to scale on affordability in large counties where in Montgomery County, I think they're supposed to be producing 3,300 units a year, and they haven't been like even close, but with already just a year in after breaking ground, after leasing up and looking at the county commissioners there voted to double their contribution this year. They are looking at 10,000 units in 20 years, which is the kind of impact that I think a lot of us are seeking, who are here because we're volunteering to make housing affordability reality in this county, and the incremental marginal dents we're making are frustrating, and not to mention complicated when you're working with the LIHTC tax exemption process. I sit on the TCFC board, and it's just incredibly complex, and it takes years to get this projects with multiple reviews through government entities. And the appeal of this, to me, the appeal of this model is that it allows, with a relatively modest contribution monetarily, to materialize and manifest housing, for instance, in Montgomery County within 3 years, and to build it to scale. One of the aspects of the model that particularly has captured my imagination is the idea that the construction industry here in Austin or Travis County or even Montgomery County does involve, private public collaborations, but in the case of LIHTC and HUD-involved properties, there remains ownership outside of the public entity. And what I find really interesting about this is that the public entity, i.e. us, would own these properties and thereby can implement this, what I think is a brilliant concept, that all revenues above what is required to maintain the property or support the amenities on the property, because these are beautiful properties. These are not shabby properties. All revenues above that level for maintenance get channeled immediately into the funds to break ground on new housing. So instead of the dividends going to private owners, they go to the public in the form of more units. And I just find that to be a really inspiring and innovative and refreshing approach that I can visualize. That being said, I have family in Montgomery County. And I am gonna be visiting the laureate, in a few weeks. And meeting with Zachary Mark, so I hope to bring back more information, but I'm really excited about what they've already built there that, I know is like working very good well. So that's my sort of first blush on this. In terms of the chair's comment that we maybe address the subpopulations issue, I think that that can also be addressed through social housing and how we attract tenants to the housing. And if at the time of leasing up, there's a tremendous need for veterans to be housed, or people emerging from foster care to be housed, or those exiting the criminal justice system to be housed, we're in a position to market that and to make that happen. So those are my thoughts initially.
Great, thank you.
I think the only other thing I wanted to mention was. So. One of the concerns I have is just the percentage of affordable units, in terms of the model, and I don't know where we are as a community, because we know what the expression has been with the PFCs with the 50% and 80%, and the model that we're looking at, only 30% of the units are affordable as opposed, and that's really what's paying for the unit of work. So I think that there needs to be, that would be something we would need to sort of try to figure out how to market and balance and socialize, because you're not talking about a traditional taxpayer unit where all of it's affordable. You're talking about a portion of those, which, as we know, some have different feelings about how that happens. So it would be something you would need to look at. And then Mr. Blunt brought up a good point about the legislation and then how we apply the contract to the, what's allowed in Texas under the statute, which is something you might want to share about. But.
Yeah, the email is interesting. Let me just summarize a few points and just so that we can stay tight. Mr. Romatiu, go ahead.
Okay, well, I would just like I was gonna raise the legislative issue because of all the changes we had in the fights with the ordinance we had with regards to PFC and setting. Secondly, are there other options available to the reset? And we've been looking at, have we looked at explored all the other options? And then how do we effectively use this option? Because there are other people out here doing it. The city of Austin, and we're in a struggle with the city of Austin for wanting percentages of the PFC deals and et cetera. And so it just forces, we have to explore all of those options, and those are my concerns. And I guess before we dig too deep and go too far down this direction, we need to make sure all of those things are incorporated in the process and part of.
Right. So let's talk about a few of these items, because I think that there's a basic level of understanding that we all have to gain as we understand this concept. First, in terms of private facilities, corporations have the issue there. So when HATSE's Facilities Corporation gives a tax break to that endeavor to achieve a certain level of socialization, that is different from what we would do, which is purchase an asset for public control, and the dividends do not go to endeavor partners, the dividends go to the public that we invest in.
That's correct.
And so the kind of PFC fight, to summarize the Heather Way criticism, goes away because the enterprise is for the public good as opposed to for the private benefit. And then the subsidization level is determined by the financial strength of our assets. And so the better we're doing, the more that the theoretical governance of it can deepen, with some obviously provisions for it reinvesting into the property, so it does not fall into disrepair, et cetera. And so that set of issues and those set of constraints are not applicable here. If anything, I suspect that in the wake of the changes to PFCs, the 394 powers all set up. I think that that is an important thing to realize. The trouble with PFCs, good for 394s. If we are a 394 and our powers, which maybe we'll put to the side for a little bit, all of a sudden a lot more interesting. In terms of effectively using it, I think that this is a big issue, and this takes us back to Mr. Blunt's email. So we have several powers that are granted to us, and some of them apply to. There's a variety, in addition to the item that Mr. Blunt has pointed out here. I've read chapters 394 at this point maybe 50 times. There are a variety of little pieces, like if you go over 20 units, you gotta have the thing for the elderly. There's the fee and lieu. If you don't have a public hearing, you can't issue the revenue, blah, blah, blah. I think assuming that we want to find a way of knowing what is our maximum that we can leverage out of 394 without having any beef, the law and the lawyers, we got to figure that out. And I think that is sort of the next phase of there's interest. In terms of competition with deals, I think one of the asks we could have of the county, since the county may not provide general fund resources, is that we become the preferred local housing tax credit developer for 5 years, for 10 years, so that we can use the income tax stream from those developments. In terms of competition with the city and AHFC, AHFC has a set of policy constraints that currently preclude the Montgomery model. They are subsidized in the way that the councilors of Montgomery County subsidize their housing authority and its financing corporation in a way I wish we were. But the specifics in terms of program latitude, in terms of rental development assistance, and a variety of other things, that are we would not compete directly at this time, and we could obviously come into an agreement about areas of focus, particularly as it relates to the emerging setup, and you're very familiar with this as a planning commissioner, land use liberalization changes that focus on things like new tiers of affordability unlocked. That would be an area of specialization we have in the city. Outside of the city, the Pflugervilles of the world, which are very important and have the same issues that we can get there faster than the city of Los Angeles. In my view, it's not gotten as fast as it should have. We are free to roam. We don't have that much competition, and if we come in with resources and vision, a specific model, and we say this is who we are, and this is what we're doing, and why you should help us do it and get to scale. Then there's a final question of resources. The $50 million, now $100 million housing production fund, coupled with the public housing agency, which is what Montgomery County has. We don't need to build 300 unit developments next year. We can start smaller. And on the HATSI side, I know staff has some experience, and HATSI has experience producing sub 20 unit buildings, right? Isn't Maynard Oaks 1 and 2? Those are small developments. So the capabilities and the ability to do it there, even if the financing scheme and the income levels there are a little different, there's sort of a track record and ability to do that. And so our fund and our focus could be a lot more modest. Moreover, unlike Montgomery County, we have our tax exemption play, which they do not have, depending again on where things fit in, what are we doing. So there's a version of the world where we can use our tax exemption with affordability unlocked for a 19 unit building with land given to us by the county, where the economics all of a sudden really work. And it's a permanent asset, and most importantly, because we are not bound by light tech or rental housing development assistance requirements of all 50% medians forever, blah, 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 we can start to create an example of how the economics can work. So I would say, I think the issues that are being raised all have feasible and immediately obvious solutions. And I would like to kind of work on these items that have been raised in this discussion to present even more detail for August and kind of talk over some of the chapter 394 items that you raised in your correspondence and that I have, stayed up late at night thinking about, so that you feel a lot more, everybody feels a lot more comfortable with the mechanics. One item that I will add is, so Montgomery County does takeouts, which, yeah, I would love to borrow the expertise from other people. So they buy the stuff that other folks develop for them. How they do that is really interesting. Obviously, we just sold an asset that we were able to borrow to purchase, and it was a much more distressed asset. It's not new development with 60, 70, 80% market. So it seems that our corporation is able to achieve the ability to take out mortgages for acquisition, and we'll be able to take out developers or other lenders that do the initial development. But we're getting into very specific and granular mechanics. The reason I'm sort of talking a lot about this is I've thought a lot about this, and there's no other way. There's no other way for 2 reasons. No one is going to give us anytime soon. Maybe we can persuade the county to give us $1 million a year, $3 million a year. But the Fed, maybe there's another COVID, and the state, maybe there's some completely unexpected political change. So we need a new tool. In scouring the landscape for a tool, this is one that is politically viable in Texas. It's a market solution to a market problem. It's politically viable in our local politics because we do not need significant resources, and is sustainable because instead of us having to do development where we never get to use demand to generate net revenue, we say we're going to use the demand to subsidize. Therefore, we don't have to rely on taxes, and we are building a balance sheet, and we are no longer just focused on the populations that have to be subsidized because of how our housing market works, but we are using cross-subsidization to solve things. I think this is the best tool that has an American model that is working. We would have to adapt it to our conditions. And I think I would put it this way. There's a future where SHFC continues to be an opportunistic long-term housing tax credit financier and is doing 1 or 2 projects. But Travis County, that is not easy, but they can do that. The city can do that. We as a board are in a unique position to take this, and I'll say this clearly, risk, saying, let's do something different. Let's take a little bit of risk. If we fail, we just don't get reappointed. And I bet you don't want to be reappointed. If we fail, we don't come back. We don't lose an election, right? The court just says those folks are wacky. People in the community say this is silly or some other day. And the staff, because this is a board proposal, we're not throwing the staff under the bus. They are helping us with our ideas. But I think the moment calls for this little bit of risk taking. It's funny that we call it risk taking because if we think about it, this is a lot lower risk because we're saying let's have publicly owned market rate developments with some inclusion of lower income populations. It's actually not that risky. It's a lot less risky to operate these assets than some of the things that you all do on the Hatsy side. We always sort of having to provide so much with so little. Long speech, I really believe in this idea, and I would really appreciate an opportunity to keep working on it for August and answer some other issues raised.
I agree with everything, and we just only reiterate, consider our failures.
Yes, sir.
And,
That is ways on this.
yeah, and we also, as you pointed out, a lot of other people have the capacity to do this, and you're starting with nothing. So how do we get there? Let's not rush into it. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but I do want us to slow down and work through this process to make sure it doesn't have to be done next month.
No, sir.
Or 6 months from now, but it can be done if proper work is put into it and dealt with, and we clear all the hurdles legally. Because Cliff and James pointed out some good things.
I agree, and I think our next step is to take this feedback, and figure out if there is even a play. Right, so the model is, if it creates curiosity for me. You hear my passion, please, that this is the best play we've got, given where we're at, the reality of where we live and what we can achieve. I hear let's go slow, given some of the recent issues, and I completely absorb it. So the next phase for me is working on some of these details now that everybody's friendly and familiar with it. And in August, we'll have a lot more precise information about what would probably be our ask of the county if we want to do it, and what would the transition plan, which is referenced in the document, is what.
Yeah, just want to say I support what, Director Wilmer has brought up as some cautionary elements to us moving forward. And, you know, as we approach each phase, I think it's important to be well documented, to have legal about counsel and to check in with all the entities that he mentions. I do agree with our chair that we do need something bold. And I think Austin needs something bold. Like, we're just not making headway in Austin and in Travis County on the issue of affordability and on adequate housing. Or even retaining housing for our musicians, for middle income, for teachers, for EMS workers. It's a crisis in my lifetime of unprecedented level. And so I think boldness is called for. Just to speak to the issue of the tiers of affordability, I just want to emphasize that the vision here is that to avoid segregation by income. So instead of there being like housing areas that have low income housing equals not great housing often, and low income residents. This idea is that it's a multi income, mixed income community. It's a community in which those who have less income to spend on rent are neighbors with those who have more income to spend on rent. And with a 30% cap on rents, that means that those with more income to spend on rent are funding the public entity to build more affordable housing, which is long overdue. And I will say that I think that this provides economic opportunity to the lower income residents to be in a community with those who are able to advance and have advanced. And I'm really, in terms of being a community advocate for many years, I really am done with the segregation by income. And so while it is a point of criticism potentially that the tiers aren't deep or wide enough, it's also a point of strength that we're building community. And that's something that Austin does. So I just want to reiterate that. Thank you.
Next up on this is a bit more feasibility work to have a kind of concrete proposal so that we can talk to the commissioners for and say, here's kind of our direction. I want to reiterate. This is on top of your low income housing tax credit opportunistic financing entity. It's not like what we're doing goes away. Quite the opposite, we might want to double down. We will want to be the premier one for a bit so that we can build a financial reserves and have an additional tool. If the county does not want to support. Mr. Howard, I hear you on, stakeholders wanting to meet, et cetera. We will meet. One thing I will convey, and I'm saying this here so that the directors understand it. Meetings are good. And requests are good, but requests have to come with resources. Too often,
Sure.
I feel we were asked to do. Too often I feel we were asked to produce blood from the stone. We produce a little bit, and then we hear, well, I wanted a pint. And it's like, well, so we will meet, but my expectation is meetings indicate that resources are gonna be forthcoming. If not, then
Well, I think if it's a good idea, it'll be affirmed through the conversations. Despite the fact that you haven't flushed out the specifics in terms of how you might fund it, but I think it only supports and reinforces a good idea. In fact, it's a good idea. And only thing I'm suggesting is, as I spoke with some of the folks in the industry talking about if there was the investment and interest, it may be good for buying purposes. As far as that part's concerned, not so much that you're going, the wrong direction. I mean, I think. I also want to mention that, so I worked with the Philadelphia Housing Authority. We had in 2002, $1 billion worth of work going on. We had 4 Hope Sixes. And if anybody's familiar with the notion of Hope Six, now called choice neighborhoods because it's more expansive, is the idea that you do integrate communities. And that's why public housing authorities don't do large seas of poverty. They do scattered sites and smaller units because you want them to you want the community to be integrated, as we talked about, and complete. People can age in place, that sort of thing. So I think we have something here, obviously, if we can get the backing and the support, knowing that the change, albeit maybe incremental, in one sense, in terms of the entirety of the space, you're not talking about a big splash, you're talking about lots of small ones, and if that's acceptable, that's fine. I think the concern I had was when we were talking about transitioning, if we're, as Mr. Roberts alluded to, maybe it's something that you ramp up, and once you get a significant amount of resources, then we decide to launch, into something, or however we elect to do, however we elect to get started as it relates to what that looks like and when that happens, or we call it a pilot because that's what you do when you're experimenting. You refer to it as a pilot. So, there's lots of possibilities as far as that goes.
I think that feedback is correct. My expectation was we were not going to build the laureate in 3 years. We were going to continue to do the opportunistic light tech stuff we've been doing, and we're going to try and see if we can find the resources, find the niche where we are a good fit. And the coming month, we're going to work hard on that. For now, we're going to move to item, unless there's an additional comments, etc. No. We're going to finish the meeting with the executive vice president evaluation and KPI discussion. So we're going to move to committee reports. I believe there are no committee reports. So we're going to go to executive vice president report. And I did want to just go over the portfolio review and the financial report for certain. So that's Mr. Parrott and Mr. Mariana Idios. Whenever you're ready.
Sure.
If we could put up the occupancy spreadsheet, which I love so much. And Mr. Parrott, just because we're trying to be super tidy today, I'm just gonna go. I read it, and my expectation was everybody reads it. So I'm just gonna go to my one question I have about it.
All right.
That's okay.
Yes, sir.
And this is. We have one, you have it in front of you, so I'm.
Yes,
my
ma'am.
copy. We have one. Site that is at 86 occupancy. And. Is it Creek?
Preview apartment home.
Yeah, can you tell me what's the story there?
Yes, let's see. Yes, sir, that is a, property that,
SHFC.
it was affected after the plan was lifted on evictions,
Mhm.
and they had a very significant number of people, or of units, that were affected by that. However, they have been issued, we just received yesterday. They have received their 8609s from PDHCA, so that they can, move forward with, some things they need to do regarding the tax credit program. We have a couple other properties that are in that range that also experience the same events. They are slowly coming back online, but right now they're in the process of approving residents for leases. And an example of that I can give you is, actually it's, the Beckett, which is now at 93%. After they went through their evictions, they were below 70%. And I've been working with them, just keeping tabs on them, talking with them about, what they're doing, meeting with their new management team on staff, and their area managers. And they are doing what they need to do. And in the last 30 days, they have brought the occupancy up from the 80s to 93%, which is right about where they should be right now. Some of this is just, it's after effects of the freeze and, and how that impacted a lot of people.
Mhm. Is it the same story at the Heights on Farmer?
At the which one, sir?
It's Heights on Farmer.
Yes,
So what the drops we're seeing have to do with eviction
yes.
policy change.
And they are, the numbers are coming up. I could go by, what I want to provide y'all is what the actual occupancy is, not what they tell me they've got leased.
Mhm.
At this point, I want to give you hard data. So they could be at 90% leased at this time, but I'm waiting until I know that there are people in the units.
If I may,
Yes, sir.
a lot of this also goes back to the pandemic. To where
Yes.
people stayed in their units until and didn't pay and didn't even seek out, because we tried to give money away to some of those folks, but they did not do that. And then ultimately, they moved home with mama and dad. Okay, and so they self-evicted without, you understand where I'm
I do.
coming from, and that's what's happened to this story.
But I do stay in, as just part of my job, I do stay in contact with management companies and monitor, okay, let's make sure that we're going in the upward direction. And
Any other occupancy questions?
Just, maybe we can just stick with one of the properties for clarity. So on the Farmer Apartments, phase 2 and Farmer Apartments, which have the lowest, how many evictions were there?
I don't have that, but I can get that for you. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Let's talk about our financial report. And I noted that it said, and this might just be because I'm rusty at looking at numbers. It said May 2023, because these are the numbers up to May.
Yeah, up to that. So, good morning. So So what you're seeing is the operating statement for just for strategic. And year to date, our revenues is close to 470,000. And our expenses is 183,000. So we are behind on the projected from what our budget, what we projected on our budget, because we are waiting, two of the properties just recently got their 8609, so they should be paying us a significant portion of the fees to us in the next couple of months. That would be one of them would be Creekview and the other one is Colorado Creek.
That is the missing 1.76.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yes, yeah. So, and then right below you will see what we have collected from the different partnerships, if you can go down. So far, and what our budgets were and what they've collected so far. And then right below it, go to the next page, is our balance sheet.
So let me ask you just one question about the balance sheet. And this is relevant to the discussion we're having on reset. So we have the uncollectible allowance for Rosemont at 7.6. You see where I'm at?
Uncollectible allowance, okay, yeah, that is a advance made to COs. It is what do you call it? It was a deposit made and strategic upfronted the funds for COs, so it's not going to be available for 15 years, right? So that's the reason.
So on the liabilities, the uncollectible write-off, the 7.9.
Yes.
I'm reading that as that's permanently gone.
Yes.
So what was that 7.9?
That is Rosemont. That's primary Rosemont.
That I totally know.
Yeah.
I'm saying, what was the sources that went into the loss? Was it our equity? Was
Yes.
it SHFC equity?
Yes.
So at one point, SHFC had equity of 7.9.
Yes.
That is now, as we all know, and what we were trying to get out quickly, and but that is the kind of, as of today, the total.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. I wanted to make sure that my mental accounting, that was the number. And tax pool is the municipal aid payment, right?
That was the investment fund because they are paying a significant interest rate. So we moved, all our cash to tax pool.
The proceeds from sale is bracketed as a loss because, or am I misreading the statement? The 4.205.
Let me go down.
Because we moved the cash to tax pool. Is that it?
The proceeds?
So, and if you look at the proceeds from sale for 205,363.
205,623.
In the proceeds from sale.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The reason it's bracketed as a loss is because that is part of the tax pool cash.
I know that is not the case. That could also be reflected as a liability that proceeds from sale.
Okay,
Yeah, so
because we have the 11,849 expectation. The account receivable for Rosemont, and so we know because of the adjustment on the uncollectible write-off,
yeah,
was that $4 million difference. And so
yeah, that could also be, if that $4 million is kind of designated for something else, then the loss would become $11 million, that adjustment at the bottom.
if we go ahead with the investment program.
Yes,
The
yeah,
the uncollectible write-off balloons to 11,
yes, I'm treating that 4.2 as.
an
strategic-
obligation.
Yeah, a strategic funds right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the balance sheet? Just in the interest of time, on the revenue projection, fiscal year 2023 and beyond.
Mhm.
So this is a silly question,
Uh-huh.
but as you know, you might have heard, we might be in the interest of becoming a more aggressive developer without light tech and needing funds. As you know, our interlocal agreement means that we have to send Patsy
Uh-huh.
900K, $1 million a year, right?
You don't
No,
have
we-
to, it depends on, the cooperative agreement we discussed.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's not,
but we're not gonna put Patsy buying anything.
well, perhaps it has been self-sustaining for the last year and a half.
I'm okay, I might quote you on that in the near future, Mr. Roberts, so, alright. But
The last year, what you saw as a budget this year was only specifically salaries and, you know, equipment and lease space. So it was not supporting operation, but it was expenses of the organization.
what I'm getting at is, and this is sort of a business term, so forgive me and correct me in terms of the proper terminology for the type of corporation that we are non-negotiable, baked in, unavoidable, bottom line burn rate. As SHFC is about 1.1 million.
Yeah.
So when I see 2 years
Hmm.
of 5 million, my simple brain says, then I have $8 million of cash to do something with. And then I see that for 2024, there's another 4 million, so I'm like, that's 8 plus 3, 11. And then it comes down, and then we're at the burn rate. So is there $11 million of incoming assetage that we could be using for something? Because we no longer have the Rosemont mortgage.
Mhm. Yeah, but this is kind of incomplete and the projection is incomplete. The commitment, that commitment to HATC is not, it's not firm or anything, because last year we got it from TCFC, which is part of HATC.
Sure, but what are you saying? If the interlocal stays in place and
Mm.
HASI makes no money, and then theoretically, strategic would provide HASI with that money if the interlocal stays in place, because the agreement is that you would fund the gap.
I guess,
Because the interlocal is in place. But
right,
I understand what your question about, if our projection is 5 million a year and we only have 2 million in committed expenses, we should have $8 million to do something with.
well, the revenue projections here for the next 3 years, which is the relevant period that I'm
Yes,
thinking about, right, is a surplus, if we assume a burn rate of $1 million a year, right, of almost $10 million. So I'm like, what's up, is this some kind of accounting fiction that I'm not misunderstanding, or do we have $10 million to invest into assets?
well, so there's the commitment to HATI, and then there's the expenses for strategic expenses, which it comes up to, what was it, 400,000? What was our budget last year?
Let me see.
I mean, this current year is. Yeah, about 400, so.
Yeah.
So, to be honest with you, I think our projections are too high. And I'm not saying that just to be, on the safe side, I do believe we've had a trouble trying to validate and affirm what we thought were the projections. And we've been struggling with that, quite frankly. That's why if you go in the previous, payments to date, if you go back to the previous, in terms of what we've gotten paid out, this is, no, Steve, not that part. No. All right. Here. So this is what we budgeted, and this is what we've gotten to date, because things aren't as rosy as we had assumed them to be, but we did a projection based on what we heard. So I'm not sure where we are as far as the projection of how valid it is. It's just my,
And these projections are provided by the partnership.
developer.
Yeah, developers, so it's nothing that I put together. I mean, I'm just collecting data.
Yeah, okay, yeah, he just,
So just to bracket this, because we have about 20-30 minutes left, this is a very high stakes number for us. Because when we go to the court and we explain to the public what we can do,
right. It looks like
we,
they are.
so we need to be, the reason it matters is because if the court is like, hey, you got $10 million.
Right.
They will be like, why are you asking for money?
Correct.
If we go to the court and we say we have no money, they'll be like, you guys can't do anything. Why are you talking to us? So we kind of have to figure out what our real number is,
Correct.
so that our requests make sense. It's also important because if we're gonna ask, hey, can we do all the 394 deals for there, so we can build our balance sheet and get off on the social housing path without you guys having to use the general fund. We gotta know kind of what the
Sure.
what we expect is, so we will need to work on this in the coming
We
months.
do, and I will say we've been feverishly trying to work toward getting and collecting this data.
Yeah,
I do believe probably a budget revision is in order based on what I'm feeling, because we seem to be falling short, and I don't know if that's why we're having a hard time getting those, validating those projections that we got at the end of the year last year, which formulated the budget. So I think maybe a revision might be in order to more align with what we think maybe is likely the case.
okay, yes, sir.
Reynolds, down also because so many new things are coming up. People are also bouncing around, moving from your house to my house and vice versa. You follow me?
Yeah, you're saying that the developments.
Right, but these are all existing.
See that in
These
the
are the one I think.
Yeah,
Okay, well, let's clarify, any other questions about our finances?
a lot of work to be done there.
No, all right,
Appreciate revisit, yeah.
yes, we'll now we have more time to talk about this kind of stuff, so now we are going to. Before we, new and unfinished business. Anything that folks want to add for the agenda next time, this is your moment, this is your shot, seeing nothing, then let's go to. New executive vice president evaluation and key performance indicators. The way I would like to do this is we're going to have a public portion where folks can have discussion in public, and then we'll have a conversation with the evaluatee in executive session for more sensitive matters. I want to briefly talk about key performance indicators. We have talked about key performance indicators in 3 spurts in the past. My proposal to the directors, which I expect they will find very compelling, is that we will use as the key performance indicators the same metrics that we use for the evaluation. And that allows us to be able to talk about the data that we care about in terms of the EVP performance and the organizational performance together. And if folks find that acceptable, then we will prepare a resolution for action, adopting those indicators and changing our reporting slightly to match them. That was my sole thought on that. If folks have feedback on that, this is the moment to provide it to me. If not, when you see the resolution for action on the message board, that will be the place to provide it. If not, at our August meeting, what we go on the adoption of KPIs. Any thoughts on KPIs? Seeing none, then let's go to new executive vice president evaluation, and we will begin any public comments folks want to have about this. I will say, to start off, work closely with our HR committee on this, is that this reflects a lot of work and a lot of conversations. One of the important things about an evaluation is it has to be fair to the person being evaluated. And so we have tried, I think we would say we've tried hard to reflect the preferences of the EVP. We're going to have a broader discussion about this. I am very satisfied with the outcome that we have at the moment because it reflects the hybrid nature of this year. It incorporates a lot of feedback from the DVP. And for the second part of it, has very well defined, hard to provide, hard to inject subjective notions, indicators and metrics. And so we can debate those and where those thresholds should be. But if you look at sort of the architecture of the rating system for the second half, it is very specific, very granular, would not create a lot of surprises, reduces discretion greatly in terms of subjectivity. Any other feedback that people want to provide now in public before we go to executive session about the evaluation?
I just want to say, I did hear the community comments, from Gabby, from Lisa about the importance of, registering what tenant experiences in these properties and being responsive to the same. I do believe that, first, this is something I worked on, so it could be only me that sees it this way. But I do think that under performance indicators and housing management, we can capture that. Also, we have an unusual situation where with the sale of Rosemont midway through the year, we've got two different grids to look at, and that was in response to one of our new directors' conversations with us in the HR committee in public last month, in which she said, let's weight them differently. So when we look at the May to December portion of the EVP performance evaluation, once again, I just want to say that under performance indicators, occupancy level is also responsive to evictions, and asset management does include how code violations and how complaints about the condition of the property is handled, insofar as we can gather that information and data and hear it here at the board, which is something we need to dig deeper to get. But I want to say I heard you, and I'm hoping that we can incorporate that consideration, which is deeply embedded in our mission, to respect tenant rights and to make sure the conditions are such that people can enjoy their housing as a home that stays secure.
Any other public feedback before we go to executive
Yeah,
session? Yes, sir.
I'd like to say that we're not a property manager.
SHFC today.
It hasn't been in the last 20 years. It's been 20 years that we've been in this. And so, Rosemont was unique in and of itself. It was an isolated incident. Any future deals that we do under whatever 9, 10, or whatever percent tax credits or whatever, we set policy and guidelines. When this board had an opportunity to get rid of Capstone, the developer at the buyer opposed that, and this board supported that and defeated on it. So we're putting a lot of liability into this particular measurement when the blame was a number of places, if you want to say.
In the first step or the second step?
Well, in both, when you move to, you carrying that same mentality.
We can talk more about this in executive session, but the first half reflects the preferences of the EVP with high fidelity to request. I would say that. And then the second half, if you look at the specifics of the kind of how we would do the asset management, it does not expect, it's currently written to, or whomever the EVP may be, it does not expect the EVP to deliver the change. It is not that they are the property manager. It is that they must take action to protect our assets. Which is slightly different.
You know, but we've been doing that technically. It's just that You know the story.
I do, and I think what I'm saying is, in the configuration, the first configuration we have. Is, I think addresses the feedback that we resolve, and we're getting that. In the second part, the way that we're evaluating is different, because it is not about. Direct property management responsibility. It is about something that we do, which is make sure that our assets are being taken care of, protected, and we do not expect that the person in the VP role will directly control outcomes. We expect them to be an advocate for a financial position of our mission.
Well, that has to be the mindset.
It is the mindset.
And that's not what I've heard, you know.
Well, we will talk about it in more
That's okay.
detail.
Yeah.
We'll talk about more detail in a second.
Yeah, okay, that's the point. I'm glad.
Any other feedback before we close the public portion? All
Well,
right.
just one
Yes,
thing, I
sir.
mean, I think, I mean, I think obviously we're gonna talk about it, but. May through December is more like 67%. 60.
Yeah, it's more like, yeah, that's the other one.
66
Probably
and
30.
67 to 33 is what I'm hearing.
All right, let
Okay,
the public record reflect that preference. And so for the public and for the record, when we return from executive session, it is our intent to adjourn. So this is the end of public deliberations. We will all return to adjourn. And so with that, I now call executive session for the board of directors to consider personnel matters under Texas Government Code annotated 551074.